Hello and welcome to the Monster Mechanics Podcast, where we take creatures of myth and media and see how they can be improved. I am your host, Scott Paladin, and with me as always is the Bill S. Preston to my Theodore Logan, Zach Jaquays. What are we talking about today, Zach?
This week we are talking about the Rancor, or Rancors, or yes, those.
So the Rancor, they're I guess Rancors, because it's not just the one.
Mm-hmm.
They are a species out of Star Wars. So, of course, that means that there's a bunch of extraneous contradictory information from both the current continuity and Legends. And like a lot of the Legends stuff doesn't agree with itself because the video game writers never talk to the novel writers. Rancors are very large bipedal, quote unquote, reptomammals, which is a Star Wars term for things that are both sort of mammalian and sort of reptilian.
So it's basically like a reptile you can milk.
God damn it. They probably do have milk. Anyway, it's a monster. Like it's a big creature with a big old mouth and a big head. And it was originally shown up as a claymation miniature that fought Luke Skywalker. And then Luke Skywalker crushes it with a door. And then inexplicably, a dude is incredibly sad about the the Rancor dying. He just like full on balls after the death of this creature. And then it's never mentioned again until, of course, because it was cool and was a cool thing in Star Wars when it goes to the extended universe, everybody has to include Rancors in everything. So they're apparently a species that has been like transported around from planet to planet. And like they're originally from Dathomir, but they show up on other planets as well. And apparently there are these Force-sensitive witches that ride Rancors because rule of cool, I guess. That was just the thing that people decided they wanted.
Do you ever get the feeling that the Star Wars like extended universe and materials are all just like a vehicle for pointing at something in the original trilogy and being like, hey, remember this?
Yes, not always. The best stuff expands. I mean, like everybody loves Thrawn, and Thrawn's not from an original trilogy.
True.
He was originally from the books. But like there are definitely books that do just that. I'm thinking of specifically Tales from Jabba's Palace and Tales from Mos Eisley Cantina, which were a series of short stories books, collections of short stories that took little tiny minor characters from like who were in the background and wrote them stories. So like there is a whole story about the dude who like looks after the Rancor. He's Jabba's beastkeeper and he wanted a Rancor since he was a little boy. And then like Jabba finally buys the Rancor and he and the Rancor bond. And it's a boy and his dog story about this Beastmaster and his Rancor. They go running through the sand dunes of Tatooine together at night. Like they are best friends. And then the Rancor is killed. And that's the end of the story. And he's very sad.
I love how they just, randomly cast Luke as a dick.
It's a really weird story. It's a very strange thing. You commented while we were talking about whether or not we were going to do the Rancor that like of course that particular Rancor has a name, which is what was on here, Patissa.
Yes.
Yeah, which made me remark that every single character who was on screen in the original trilogy, I think, has a canon name.
I believe it. Like even like the random stormtroopers and whatnot.
A bunch of them have names. Yeah, the guy who runs through Bespin carrying an ice cream maker is I sent it. It's like Will Rod Hood or something like that. It's like dude, he's got a name. Like he's canon, and he's just carrying a Sears ice cream maker because it looked vaguely sci-fi, and they needed to give this guy a prop. But that is a cosplay that I think more people should do. It's like just get yourself an ice cream maker and a little bit of a slightly sci-fi outfit, and you can run around conventions being Wilro Hood. Okay, so there's a bunch of Legends information about the Rancor. I think we're gonna mostly try to stick to our on-screen information because that's about all I got. Like I didn't read the comics or anything like that. So I know that they're from Dathomir and they're big reptile creatures. Let's try to figure out like there's some questions about the Rancor.
Sure.
Like why is it bipedal? Why is it like it's got these tiny little eyes? Like the eyes of the Rancor are quite small compared to the rest of its head. They are forward facing like a predator should, so that makes sense. This thing's carnivorous. We see it eat a Gamorrean guard at one point. The small eyes thing makes me think that that's not its primary sense. I think maybe smell, because if you look at the model, it's got these big old nostrils right in the front of its face between its eyes. So that makes me think that like it's got to be like a scent-based predator.
Sure, yeah.
And it's like basically a T-Rex, right? Like it's a like large apex predator for, I'm thinking maybe something that, if there's not a lot of light, I'm kind of thinking maybe swamp-like, unless it's subterranean. What do you think?
I would lean subterranean. Like that makes sense with the way it was being held in Jabba's palace. Like if you're not just assuming, animal cruelty, which I think is
If they're like trying to keep it in its, I mean, and mind you, being underground on a desert planet is actually just a smart move. Like that's probably one of the more hospitable areas. So it's not like necessarily like animal cruelty. It's just that like most of Jabba's palace is probably built into the sand. Like Luke's home is just a pit that they've like dug out into. And that's because once you dig down into the earth a certain amount, the temperature tends to level off. And so it's actually quite a bit cooler to be inside of the rock than it is to be out on the surface. There is an entire town in Australia that originally started off that way. They like dug their town into the side of a cliff. And now it has, since the invention of air conditioning, they've now expanded out. But
this is a total wild tangent, but now I'm picturing desert hobbits just with their hobbit holes. And
oh, that is a fantastic idea. The hobbit hole as a desert adaptation is great.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. That's really good, actually.
But then again, I guess the opening of The Hobbit tells us that it was not a sandy hole or a nasty, dark, wet hole, but a hobbit hole.
But a hobbit hole. Okay. So back to Rancors.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're thinking, okay, so subterranean's cool. Now, normally you'd think that like subterranean, I kind of think of subterranean stuff as kind of a bit smaller than this huge, like, it's like 12 feet tall. It's this massive thing. But maybe it's either from a planet where those, like maybe there's a large network of tunnels, Underdark style, through the entire planet would be kind of cool. Or maybe it's got those big claws actually for like digging tunnels. Maybe it's actually a mole creature a little bit. Like it is actually one of the tunnelers.
That'd be kind of cool.
Which would explain what those big claws are for. Like it is that it's actually going to spend a lot of its time digging into soil and rock.
Although, like, they don't seem particularly suited for digging. Like, usually animals that have, like, digging claws, the claws end up a little bit more spade-like.
Yeah. The ones depicted on the Rancor are very much more, like, predatory, like, raptor talons rather than digging shovels.
Although I love the idea with a Rancor with big old mole claws.
I like it, too. And I also like the... like if you took some more mole rat traits from it, like I'm looking at its mouth and it actually has kind of a mole rat kind of face to it. Naked mole rats have that kind of wrinkly like mouth that like doesn't cover the teeth enough, and the little beady eyes and stuff, like or in this case maybe no eyes for truly subterranean, because once you have no light, there's no reason to have them at all. The fact that it's got eyes at all says to me that there is probably some amount of natural light in its original habitat.
I'd imagine bioluminescent nonsense, but
maybe I'm thinking maybe there's it's sort of a boundary predator. Like it spends a lot of its time underground, but it's able to go up to the surface occasionally for something. Maybe it does some of its hunting up there at night. That would be kind of cool. Where maybe this is a world where it comes from a world full of like dune style worms that like dig out these huge tunnels.
Okay.
And so that because of the presence of these other creatures, it doesn't have to do any digging in order to get around underground. That'd be kind of cool. And then you could have like, I'm kind of imagining we only see one of them, but it'd be kind of cool if they live in packs, like wolves or whatever, or dolphins or something.
Well, I mean, that kind of makes sense, especially if they're like, they describe them as sort of like semi-sentient.
Yeah. A little bit smarter, but I was thinking like having a pack of these things hunting down one of these big worms is a cool image to me.
Oh yeah.
Or like they're like laying an ambush for it, and then they like all like sick on it at the same time and use their big claws to like tear into it and stuff. All like a pack of lions.
Yeah, I think that's a really cool idea, because we always think of like the giant, like I guess sandworm like creatures as sort of an apex predator. Like what's going to hunt that? But like the idea of a bunch of smaller creatures hunting it in packs is really cool, especially when those smaller creatures are huge.
Yeah. And I'm thinking like Yeah, and I'm thinking that maybe the sandworms aren't like, or how about this? They get super big, and once they get past a certain point, they're like too big to be threatened, kind of like a blue whale. Like nothing really hunts a blue whale because like there isn't anything big enough to really do damage to them. But at their like smaller stages, when they're kind of going from the very small, actually I'm thinking about, so there's the sunfish, also called the mola, which I know you're familiar with.
Yeah.
They have one of the smallest, small, like early stages. They have this huge discrepancy from when they are spawn, called fry, to when they get full size.
Okay.
They're like little tiny microscopic, like, like a couple of, like an inch long when they're babies. And then they get huge.
Yeah.
And that's kind of their strategy, is they produce a ton of babies, some of which will make it to like adulthood, at which point they can't be threatened anymore. But a bunch of them are going to get eaten off in the meantime. And I'm thinking maybe the sandworms of their, or dirt worms or rock worms or whatever it is from this other planet, they do the same sort of thing where like they spawn a bunch of their offspring. And so there's this stage where like they're not the size of a skyscraper yet, where you could still attack them. And that's where the predators of Dathomir, or I guess whatever planet we're coming up with, like the Rancor, like that's their food source to go after these things.
Okay, yeah.
And if they're a social predator, something that's like more intelligent than, they're not a like a trying to think of, I don't actually know if we've tested the intelligence of something like a Gila monster or Komodo dragon or anything like that. But if they're more like dog level, or maybe even a bit smarter than a dog, then it explains why they can be tamed, like because they're intelligent and they're also used to working with other members of the pack. So like if you raise a Rancor in captivity and raise it around humans and allow it to imprint on humans, then like it actually could be quite cooperative, and then you just have to train it to attack like a German Shepherd or something like that. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah.
So okay, so that explains what maybe its big claws are for. It's like ripping into these big worms that are its food source. I wonder if there's anything else we can sort of like suss out by its.
So what's the benefit of it being bipedal?
That's a good question. Unlike a lot, I would say that, like it had evolved that way, sort of like dinosaurs did. But what's interesting about the Rancor is that it has these huge arms and kind of small legs, which is not how you typically see the configuration of bipedal creatures that do a lot of walking, because if it has to travel long distances, then you'd think that longer, powerful legs would be a better investment, and that smaller, less useful arms may or may not be kept around. But like you'd expect it to be more, what's the word, like even between the two of them. So that makes me say that maybe it doesn't do a lot of walking, like it doesn't have to travel long distances.
Maybe the worm tunnels that it's in are a lot more vertical than like you typically expect when you're thinking of like tunnel systems.
Oh, okay, so it's doing a lot of climbing then.
Yeah.
And then those claws are really for like, instead of it doing its digging itself, but it's really just to grab hold of like the sides of these tunnels to move through them. I could see that. I could totally see that. I'm looking at the just more of these pictures and stuff of it. Yeah, I think that makes sense. It might also be that so maybe it evolved from a creature that like was smaller and did a lot more climbing overall too, where it's just sort of kept that configuration. It's very like, it's interesting because depending on who's drawing them, they're either kind of like their skin texture is very skin-like, or they're like armored with spikes and
Oh yeah.
Maybe that's you can have like subspecies variants and stuff like that. I wonder if maybe I'm trying to figure out like, why would there be a difference? Like what is it about the spiky ones that cause them to grow spikes?
Is it like a sexual characteristic? Like
sexual dimorphism?
Yeah.
I wonder if maybe my instinct is to say that if you have a bunch of big old spikes on you, those are mostly defensive, right? Like you're not using those. Like if you've got spikes on your shoulders, that's not an attack weapon. And it seems like the biggest threat to a Rancor would be other Rancors. So a good reason to have spikes like that would be to fight off other Rancors. And that makes me think that maybe so if we're going to do a sexual dimorphism thing, maybe it's like, we could flip it on its head. Normally it's like the males fight over the females, right? Here's my pitch. The females fight other Rancors to defend their young.
Okay. So like other Rancors might see their young as like a food source or something, or competition.
Yeah. Or like it's really common because we're thinking maybe they're a pack-based structure, but it's really common in some social groups for the males of a species to try to kill off the young of other males.
That makes sense. Yeah.
They'll come in and be like, we're going to kill the young lion cubs so that I can, mate with the females and have my own offspring. Whereas in this situation, if a male tried that, the females might be like, no, we're not going to handle that and defend them. And in doing so, they need to have defense so they can face off. And it's just like a competitive advantage only for fending off male Rancor attacks.
Interesting. I like that.
That's kind of cool. Of course, if I've been hanging out with the wrong kinds of people too much, because one of my other thoughts is like, this thing doesn't have junk. Like this thing doesn't have genitals. It's very clearly naked and there is no dingus. Like we get a really clear look at this thing's crotch and there is just nothing there.
Yeah, it's
like they didn't give it a loincloth or anything. Poor dude.
I don't think I'm going to be the guy Googling Rancor junk, but
that stuff's out there, Rule 34 and everything. But what I'm thinking is that prompts me to ask the question of, well, then how does it reproduce? Is it maybe, I guess we don't get a look at its butt, really.
Do you think it has a cloaca?
There could be a cloaca back there. One thing I'm interested in is the idea of macro scale creatures, large animals that use external fertilization.
Okay.
Which is pretty rare. And I don't know why that would be the case off the top of my head. If you are a biologist and have an argument for why large creatures don't use external fertilization, please tell me. But I'm thinking if we're talking about how, you might have a situation where like a female lays eggs in a corridor or tunnel, right? And then a male comes by to just like fertilize them, just kind of squats over them and does their business. And so in that case, maybe while the eggs are developing before they hatch, you have to have a period of time where the female is like tending over them and defending them from other Rancors who like look at them and go, ooh, delicious eggs.
That is kind of an interesting idea. Like I picture them like kind of like a nomadic species almost, like if they're like hunting worms and whatnot.
Oh yeah, like migratory, like not migratory exactly, but they'd have like a large range that they'd be moving through or like following the worms around.
Which might mean they have some sort of mechanism for carrying the eggs with them or something. But
well, like if they're a pack, then they must. Yeah, I was gonna say maybe they just abandon them fish style, where they're like, okay, you eggs, I'm gone, and like just lay them and leave. But like if they're a pack predator, then they want to live the incentive to live and interact with people who are your relatives essentially is high, because like then your mutual success all sort of shares, like you all share genetic structure. So, the success of your sister is a success for your genes as well. And it's easier to maintain a pack structure with at least some family component.
That's true.
So maybe that's the case. Maybe not. Ooh. Let's steal. Okay. So one thing I like the idea of is, with a lot of reptiles, they don't have chromosomal sex determination.
Okay.
The determination between a male crocodile and a female crocodile is the temperature at which it was incubated. Literally, I think it's males or hotter. I could be wrong about that one. But like if they incubate the temperature, the nest and the eggs at like, 91 degrees Fahrenheit, and I'm just making these numbers off the top, but if it's like 91, then they're all going to be females. And if it's 93, then they're all going to be males. It's like this like little differences.
Interesting.
Right. And so maybe there's some other external factor that determines whether or not eggs are male or female. Okay. What if it's one of those, like maybe it's temperature based again, but the difference is quite a bit bigger. Like you have to in order to get females, they have to be like essentially body temperature for the Rancor. And so the Rancor like lays their eggs, they get fertilized, and then it takes some of them with it and like carries them essentially. Like maybe there's a pouch, maybe they're marsupial like, or maybe it just sort of like, I don't know, mucus style adheres them to its back or belly or something like that. And she carries these things off. And those, because they're being warmed by her body heat, develop into female Rancors. And then those female Rancors become part of the pack.
So now it's a reptomarsupial.
The carrying if it's got a pouch, definitely marsupial. But if it's carrying the eggs like mucus to it, I was thinking a little bit more amphibian, but yeah. And then the ones that get left behind, because it doesn't carry the full amount of them with it, like lays way more like eggs than it needs. She carries off her babies, and those are the ones that she like fights and defends. And then it's got all these other eggs that are going to grow up to be males.
Mhm.
And like the first thing that happens is like they start hatching and then they start eating each other probably because I don't know, that seems thematically appropriate. And then all of these male rancors, they are the ones who like grow up and then they become solo predators. Like kind of like in a lot of places, like wild hogs do this, where the bulls or boars will run off and be on their own, whereas the sows form. Oh crap! I can't remember the word for a group of hogs. It's sounders. They form sounders, and so you'll have this like sort of matriarchal group of females who are all hanging out, and they've got like females and young, and they're all hanging out together. And then the males kind of like float in and out of the various sounders. They like come hang out for one with a little while. They'll mate with some of the females, then they'll move over, and that's how you get genetic diversity in the mating. Because like the males move around as opposed to everybody just sticking together into one group.
Okay,
that's kind of cool.
Yeah, when you pictured like a toad, like I was picturing just like the Suriname Rancor.
No, do not. Nope. Both of us respond to trypophobic crap, and like we're not bringing up the Suriname toad. Although we haven't had any body horror yet, so maybe that's right. But one thing I'm thinking about is I wonder if these guys have a sort of torpor state. A lot of large predators, especially reptilian predators, when they eat a big meal, will like then spend a lot of time like just kind of hanging out.
Just digesting. Yeah.
Yeah, just digesting. And if these things take down one of these worms and like gorge themselves on it, then you can imagine that like the whole pod of them is probably going to be like lazing around for a long time afterwards, just digesting it.
Yeah.
There's actually it's kind of interesting because they might be a very important part of the ecosystem of their world, because if they take down one of these worms, I'm sure they're not going to be able to eat all of it. And so they're going to leave a carcass, and any kind of predator that does that then has a bunch of followers on. Other creatures come in and scavenge off of it. Either it'll be other rancor pods or they'll be like smaller scavengers and like other creatures that are going to come in and feed on these things. So I imagine that like if they take down a big enough one of these worms, then like it might even be a little bit like a whale fall in the ocean, where like a whole like thriving ecosystem springs out of nowhere just to devour this entire carcass and break it down. That's cool.
Yeah, I do like that idea. Just kind of like the idea that like maybe like the first indication that there's like a rancor pod in your area is that, you know, you're starting to see like all these lesser scavenger creatures kind of on the outskirts.
That like those little creatures aren't particularly in threat from the rancor because they're not the rancor's food, you know, they're almost like not worth fighting. Ooh, maybe they even work like the little birds that pick the bits of crap out of alligator teeth.
Oh yeah.
Like you see a rancor sitting there with like its open mouth, and you'll have like this little like creature like crawling around it being like, oh, I'm gonna, you know, pull this chunk of worm meat out of your mouth and like chew it up, and then it can't rot and like cause them tooth problems.
Yeah, I think
that's cool.
Yeah.
I actually really like the idea of the rancor of being like actually like in their natural habitat being super chill about that stuff. Like they've got their one thing that they eat, and they don't really care about anything else, you know? Which makes the situation that we see in the movie all the more effed up, because like this is a rancor that has like become so like divorced from its natural state that it's like all angry and stuff, and basically been
he's just grumpy because his teeth hurt. Yeah,
his teeth hurt. Yeah, and he hasn't been able to get like his proper worm meat food, and he's like, you know, he doesn't have a if it's a actually. Let's make a guess. Okay, so the one that's in the movie has like shoulder pads. So there's a little bit of armoring there. I'm trying to figure out if that would be based off of the art. Is that the spikiest we see, or are they less spiky in other art is the question.
I'm sure they're spikier in other art.
Yeah, I think so, because the one that we see in the movie is probably as least spiky as we see. Seems like the ones that whenever they draw them in other stuff, they tend to be more spiky. So that makes me think that this is a male.
I mean, that's also just kind of the habit, the escalation of reusing content. Is like, oh, it's like that Rancor you saw, but this one is black and force sensitive and covered in spikes. And
well, yeah, but like we're gonna make all of that continuity gel well together. That's our job. So this is like a male rancor. So this is one that maybe wouldn't have been part of a pack. He is solitary. So he's not like missing the other rancors, but maybe they would, you know, at least get some socialization by like moving from pack to pack, and it hasn't seen another one for a while. So it's probably all like sad, basically. Poor Patissa.
Then you've got the Bull Rancor.
Yeah.
I'm going to send you a link to some art here. A little bit of a departure from what we see in the movie.
Yeah, that thing's covered in spikes. So that would be a female. It's like a ironically not in our continuity is ironically not a bull. It would be the they probably have it's weird what animals get like specific names for the females and males of the species, you know? Where it's like dogs have dog and bitch, cows get bull and cow. But then there's like lion and lioness, I guess. And then like after that you're like, it's just a male bird and that's a female bird. We don't get, unless you're talking about chickens and then it's cocks and hens and roosters. I guess it's the ones that we're most familiar with. It's like if it existed on a farm.
They'll have something to differentiate.
Yeah. Then okay. I guess that makes sense. There's a Rancor dragon. I'm going to have to click on that shit.
Wait, what?
I'm just on Wikipedia and this thing's got fucking bat wings.
Like I said, there's always that urge to escalate.
Oh yeah. 100%. Look at that shit. Yeah. It's like got like either the tentacles or dreadlocks. I'm not entirely sure.
I'm sure that's someone's Mary Sue character. Just like, oh yeah, they've tamed the Rancor dragon and have force powers, but aren't a Jedi. And
there's a Tyrant Rancor. Oh, that another picture. Lame. It's a gnarled. Okay, so we're getting into game stuff where there's just like I click on the thing and it's just a slightly different model for the other ones. Okay, the Jungle Rancor looks pretty cool.
Oh yeah,
it's like a whale. Look at this thing.
Oh damn, that is cool.
Yeah, it's got like that thing's got an entirely different aesthetic. It's got like webbed hands and feet, and it's covered in like little tiny spines, and it's got like that crest that it's got on its front makes me think that these things they do like sheep, like male sheep do, or like they ram their heads against each other.
Oh yeah,
that'd be cool. That's actually really rad. I like the fact that they went so far with it. Like it's got the same basic body configuration.
Very much has like that tortoise shell kind of aesthetic to it.
Yeah. That one looks friendly. It seems like this would have a like there'd be a children's cartoon inside the Star Wars universe that's like that features one of these characters. Like yeah. Or like I love that.
Yeah, I think the Jungle Rancor is my favorite take on the Rancor so far.
Okay, so if Rancors are not just a single species, but in fact like taking away from this idea that maybe there are other kinds of Rancor, some sort of like there are a bunch of different kinds of canid, you know?
Yeah.
Like, are there other Rancors we could come up with real quick? Like, would there be a snow Rancor that's all furry?
Oh yeah,
because like in canon there's because the Tauntauns from Hoth there is a version of them that doesn't have any fur that lives on other like hotter planets. And so theoretically you could have a Rancor that was covered in white fur and like lived on a big snowy world. And that would probably be adorable.
Yeah. I mean, like with the repto-mammalian nature, like you can kind of hand wave like the kinds of environments it can survive in.
Do whatever you want, you know? You could even have space Rancors who live on asteroids or something. Actually seeing this one that is like fully, that's like half, it's kind of the seal version of a Rancor. Like it looks like it's kind of like it lives sort of in the water, but also not in the water. I wonder what a fully aquatic Rancor would look like, where like it did the whale thing where like it slowly evolved more and more to spend more and more time in the water until it's like full on, like, you know, I'm thinking maybe like, you know, the two legs or the tail has become very long and,
there's the Tracor, which is pretty much exactly what you're describing.
Oh, the Tracor?
Yes.
Did I miss it?
TRA'Cor.
Oh, the Tracor. Oh yeah. Yeah, totally. I think I would go a little bit farther with it and like maybe diminish the legs even more. But I'm totally down with that. Also, that thing has nostrils and whatever I'm talking about definitely needs a blowhole. Also, okay, something else is looking at this thing's face, it needs more fatty tissue. And also it's got way too much muscle definition because like aquatic animals, especially mammals, need to have a lot of blubber to keep their own body heat in. So this thing should be fat and chubby.
Love it.
Have you ever seen somebody like messing with the beluga, like the beluga whale's like head lump thing?
No, I haven't, but
it's like a water balloon, like the thing on the front of their head. It's like a water balloon. Like you can squish it like a stress ball. It seems very satisfying. So you can imagine a Rancor with one of these things, like this big old squishy head that like
That actually gives me anxiety. Like, I feel like,
Do you feel like it's gonna pop or something?
yes.
Okay. Well, so we've I think our version of the Rancor is actually really fun. So and whether or not they have squishy heads is entirely about whether or not you have anxiety about it. So let us move on to some listener questions. Let me pull those up real quick. I very unhelpfully did not ask for more of these, and also don't remember when the last time I did was. So we got a lot. I got to scroll back really far.
Yes, if you are a listener, please send questions to us.
Yes, please. Yes.
Ask us about our monsters. Ask us about other monsters we haven't done.
Ask us anything. We'll answer any kind of questions. We have opinions about because we're white dudes, so we'll talk about anything, no matter how little we know about it. First question by Richard Kreutzlandry at R. Kreutzlandry. Which monster definitely has a podcast, but definitely shouldn't? So the obvious answer on that one is sirens, right? Like sirens should not have podcasts, but they probably definitely do. Although actually, if you're singing, is it a podcast? Is there all musical podcasts?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like there's got to be like a split there where like they talk about, they dissect the song and then sing.
Yeah.
And then.
Well, okay. So what other ones would be good? I feel like what's a creature that has a lot to say about crap? Like dragons are actually a pretty good answer on that one, like you said, because like those dudes are old and probably are like very opinionated. What is a dragon if not the white dude of a D&D setting, right? Like they're entitled and they get into entrenched. Everything. They have all the money.
Sitting on old wealth.
Yeah. Never
worked a day in their life. Now I'm just picturing this dragon just sitting there spouting conspiracy theories.
I don't know if we covered this one or not. Did we do least favorite?
Least favorite monster?
Yeah. Does that sound familiar? I can't remember. I should be marking these off as we ask them.
Probably a good idea. I have goldfish memory, so.
Yeah, me too. Anything that happened more than a week ago. From KJ at Lunar Burritum, is there a least favorite for you both that's been featured on the show? I'm gonna have to go back every time everybody asks us a question about like ones that have been featured on the show. I have to like go look at our giant list because I have no memory about anything that we've covered.
Like anytime someone says like, so what's your favorite or least favorite or what have you done on the show? And my mind just completely blanks. And I remember like 2 things we've done. Yeah.
So I think I'm going to caveat this question to say that we're talking about like the stock version of these creatures.
Okay.
Because I really like our versions. Like the ones that we come up with are usually really fun. And I would feel really bad being like, oh yeah, that was not a good episode that we did.
Yeah. I was going to have to say something like, when I was like, A, they're all my babies. And B, I also don't remember half the we said about these things.
Yeah. But looking at the ones that like we've done that like, like what was the original version of them? I have to say, I don't have a lot of affection for the D&D monsters. Like I do kind of like beholders are pretty cool. I really like illithids, but like the Umplebee is not a good creature. Like it has a quality of being very sad and pitiful, and therefore I can't feel too bad. I can't have too much anger towards it because it's a super big dork, but also like it's just not a very good idea.
Yeah, for me, I actually have a lot of affection for the D&D monsters, and that's mostly just nostalgic upbringing type stuff. Like I grew up with this stuff and big fan of it. I think for me, like the least interesting baseline monster to me is probably Bigfoot. Like, I just never really got the appeal of a big, blurry, primitive man creature.
Yeah. Bigfoot is only, if you're taking Bigfoot seriously, I totally see where you get from. Like, that's not an interesting thing, Mm-hmm. What is funny is that Bigfoot is meme potential. Like Bigfoot is funny. Mm-hmm. And that's Bigfoot's big appeal to me.
Sure.
At least. But yeah. Let's go back to my giant list of Richard Kreutzlander questions.
Thanks for supporting the show, Richard.
So, see some of these questions. Which monster is most likely to be your grandma? And the answer to that is the big bad wolf, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of an open and shut case, but
yeah.
I mean, doppelganger is the cop-out answer to that.
Similarly, maybe if you're in a D&D universe, dragons, because they mate with everything and can have babies with everything. So like, yeah, like actually that's a really good. Well, no, I was going to say, you know how everybody in America, if you ask them like, well, what's your ancestry? Like, half of people are like, oh yeah, I'm like 1/32nd Cherokee on my mom's side. Can you imagine that in a D&D universe, everybody has that but for dragons?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I'm 1/16 copper.
Yeah. On my dad, I'm 1/16th copper on my dad's side, and 1/32nd blue on my mom's side.
I kind of love that.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, I'm sorry. What were you saying about what's the worst one?
What's the worst creature you could discover to be in your ancestral lineage?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, like, okay, so on the one hand, it's like, are you worried about other people's thoughts about it? Or are you worried about like, oh no, suddenly I've got, illithid in my medical history or something?
Yeah. Because I mean, there's always going to be that
stigma.
The stigma of having a monster in your lineage, but just from a straight up just, oh great, now I have to worry about brain grubs or something because I've got illithids in my history.
I honestly think that psionic creatures like illithids, and there's other ones out there, but ones that like give you telepathic powers are actually a pretty raw deal because I have enough problems with intrusive thoughts that are my own, let alone everybody else's all of a sudden. Like I don't need to deal with other people's thoughts too. I really don't want to know what other people actually think of me.
Yeah. No, that's information I do not need.
Is there anything else? Like, is there a creature that turns out that you're just going to fall apart one day because it turns out that you're
because I feel like this would open up a whole ton of questions, but an ooze?
Ew, yeah. Yeah, no, thank you. I'm just going to start melting one day. Okay, well.
Yeah, as soon as you start delving into but how, that's a conversation you don't want to have.
The problem is I've been around the internet too much. I know exactly how.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. All right, well, on that case, I think we're going to end it this week.
All right, until next time.
All right, bye.
See you later.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Monster Mechanics. No plug this week, straight to the credits. Monster Mechanics is produced and edited by me, Scott Paladin, hosted by myself and my best friend, Zach Jaquays. All of the ideas generated during this podcast are released under a do what the f*** you want public license.